What if I tell you that Sparkle is possessed by Aha? What if I tell you that during the 4.0 main quest between Sparxie and Sparkle, neither of them was the mask? What if I tell you that Sparkle's lore is a rabbit hole, pun intended, much deeper than what it looks like on the surface? I hope I got your attention, because it is time for us to dive deep into the story of Honkai Star Rail's most misunderstood character. Before we start to analyze Sparkle's own personality, let's examine the side of her, the existence of which we've only recently learned about: Sparxie. The main storyline of version 4.0 has divided players into two separate camps. Some assume that the real personality all along was Sparxie, while others believe that it was Sparkle. While I was researching the community's opinion on that matter, especially on r/Sparkle main subreddit, I got the impression that everyone believes Sparxie is the original Sparkle, while Sparkle herself is nothing but her mask. Perhaps Sparxie tricked players into thinking she was the original by constantly referring to Sparkle as the old model. Or maybe her last words about Sparkle forcing Sparxie to abandon her, like a master would do a mask, was once to blame. When repeatedly asked about which of them is the real one, Sparkle herself has not given a definitive answer, instead reducing everything to a joke and saying that
it doesn't matter.
It seems as if by the end she herself starts to doubt the reality of her existence. And all of this contributes to the doubts being born in the minds of players as well. But let us not forget that we're dealing with Aha's most prominent follower, who will always conceal the truth and leave you with ambiguous answers to get a good laugh. And while Miss Sparkle's never gonna tell a lie, congrats, you just been rickrolled. Everything that comes from the lips of these two should be taken with a massive grain of salt. She may not be lying, but she certainly is not telling the whole truth either. Sparxie's real identity can actually be guessed long before the final confrontation with her, if we are to pay close attention to many subtle details left in the dialogue throughout the entire storyline, both by the secondary characters and by the two sides of the same coin, named Sparkle. Do you recall how Sparxie usually refers to her? An old model. But if she's an old one, then she herself should be the new one. But doesn't the very phrase old model imply that she appeared before the new one did? If we're talking about, let's say, car models, the old one will always be manufactured before the new, just recently released one. Thus it turns out that the old model, that is, Sparkle, was around for longer than the new model, Sparxie. It would have made sense for Sparxie to call her alter ego an old mask, because in that case, her being old would not have implied that she came to life before Sparxie herself. It would have simply meant that Sparkle was one of her masks, once used and then discarded when newer, more interesting masks appeared. Does she call her that? Yeah, once, before the final battle, merely to draw attention and sow doubt in the minds of both the main character and her own doppelganger. In fact, it is Sparxie herself that gives off the most hints that she's not real. For example, in the cutscene, she accidentally lets it slip. She says that after the fight there will only be one Sparkle left in the world. So why not Sparxie? She herself, of course, remembers perfectly well which of them is the original, yet from time to time she accidentally breaks her character. If Sparkle truly is just Sparxie's mask, then how did she get her own mask? More precisely, as we could have seen in one of her trailers, as well as in a variety of vault events and story quests on Penacony, even several masks. She has at least 4 of them. Surely the presence of the mask on Sparkle's model could be explained by the developer's sheer laziness and unwillingness to create a different model for her just for a few hours of gameplay, yet the mask remains on her head in cutscenes too. Absolutely all of them, and they are created from scratch. Besides, Sparkle's signature mask can be seen among other items flying out of the smoke cloud while they're fighting, meaning that the mask being physically present on Sparkle is a proven fact. A mask that possesses more masks than its owner sounds strange even for the followers of the God of Laughter. But even if that were true, where exactly is Sparxie's own mask anyway? She's a masked fool that supposedly managed to impersonate Sparkle and infiltrate a tavern under her name, yet not even once we've shown how her mask looks like. The hat? Maybe, though it should be worn on the face, not on the head, so that option doesn't really work for her.
Oh yeah? And what might that be?
Well, that is a universal mask of a Phantasy Moon supplicant, which adapts its visual appearance to the inner world of its owner and therefore matches the looks and style of Sparxie's other clothes. This is not a mask, as any other person could have been in her place, just like Sunday. She also began using her powers on a larger scale only after receiving the mask, previously limiting herself to an extremely localized brainwashing within a single school, which on top of that could have been easily resisted and countered. Speaking of her powers, no surprise that Sparkle and Sparxie are certainly very similar in that regard, but there is one crucial detail that's very easy to miss. Sparxie has fewer powers than Sparkle. In order to take a small group of people under control, she had to resort to usage of Masked Fool's mimetic virus, whereas Sparkle in her 2.0 companion quest demonstrated that she can control people's minds without putting in any real effort. She just surrounded Black Swan with passers-by as if it's nothing. Both Sparxie and Sparkle possess shape-shifting abilities, yet Sparxie had to put on the supplicant's mask for that. Sparkle, in the meantime, is able to change her appearance seemingly effortlessly. She has no need to put on her mask for that. Let us also remember that she can make herself invisible to an outsider's eye, knock people out, shape-shift into multiple people at once, and finally teleport someone far away without even touching them, just with a glance. Can Sparxie do this? Perhaps. We don't know her for long enough to outright claim that she can, but if such abilities were within her control, it would have made her confrontation with the Trailblazer much easier. It would have been foolish not to use them. Finally, after the completion of the storyline, Sparxie can be encountered a few more times. For example, on the very square we first encountered her in a fight. And this time she'll behave almost like the original Sparkle, and will even call the player grey hair, something that she never did before. The Trailblazer themselves will also begin to see the real Sparkle and Sparxie and address questions directed to her. She, in her turn, will no longer pretend to be Sparxie and answers as she is. For example, in one of the daily messages that you receive after obtaining Sparxie, there is the following dialogue option. It would seem that Sparxie is the one who wrote to us, the conversation is about her either, yet the player for some reason mentions Sparkle. The situation repeats itself even during her first visit to the Astral Express. We can make a joke that she's already familiar with the train, even though Sparxie has never been on it before. But she'll immediately tell us to keep quiet, as she cannot break her character. Even if Sparxie were the original, who simply had the mask's memories transferred to her after they fused, and could see Sparkle's past visits to the Express through her eyes, her answer would still not make any sense. What character can she break exactly? The fact that Sparkle is still a possible visitor to the Express after the end of the main story already is an undeniable proof that she is the original. After the completion of certain quests, various characters can no longer visit us, such as Luo Xia, who was detained at the end of Luofu's respective storyline, or Misha, who has long since ceased to be a living person at all. Therefore, the mask, having returned to its owner, should stop visiting us on her own too. And yet, Sparkle can still be found on the Express from time to time. Whatever the truth is, one of them should be the mask, while the other a person, right? Wrong. I think that Sparxie is an entity created by Sparkle and based on her personality, yet completely distinct from that of a mask. Both the public and the authorities seem to be convinced that Sparxie is an ideogenitive imaginary, and we've even told in the news that her creation was not coordinated with the relevant department. On the first glance, everything seems perfectly logical. Imaginary become the stronger the more wish power they absorb from the people around them. Not only does it keep them alive and allows them to exist in the real world, but also opens a path to more powers for them. And what can bring an imaginary more popularity, fame, interest, love and constant attention than a career of the most famous streamer on the entire planet? The effect wish power has on normal people does not manifest itself in any way. They can give it away, yet either they are unable to receive it, or the desires of others accumulate in humans without any effect. Sparxie herself in the plot asks her fans to give her as much willpower as possible, a desire that makes sense for an imaginary that burns it like fuel. Finally, when defeated, she suggests Trailblazer hands her over to the Department of Aberration Defense for further imprisonment. But if she were a mask or even a human being, she wouldn't be a subject to laws that apply to imaginary, and she would be handled by a different authority. Then, if not an imaginary, why does she even bring this up? At first glance, it sounds quite coherent. Sparxie is an ideogenerative imagine which existed on Planarcadia for quite some time, rather than appearing out of nowhere just prior to our arrival, because she had already gathered a massive audience, which would have been otherwise impossible to reach quickly without, let's say, another mimetic virus. But if you think about it... Firstly, Sparxie's memoria in the tavern was self-aware, and was either a whole fragment of her, or an exact replica of Sparxie, purposefully left there by herself. But can an Imagine create another Imagine? Actually, yeah, it can, but it was demonstrated in-game only once, with a ghost created out of an orc, and technically speaking, it's an Imagine of an Imagine. But that clot of memoria is no ghost. It is unclear whether it is possible or not. Right, let's approach it from a different angle. If Sparxie is an ideogenerative imagine born out of the collective unconscious of the inhabitants of Planarcadia, then why does she look so much like Sparkle, and most importantly, thinks that she's Sparkle? Sparxie mentioned that Sparkle told her about Trailblazer more than once, hence they must have crossed paths in the past. But how is this possible if Sparxie hates the old model so much? Would she really care for a conversation with her or be ready to listen about the Trailblazer? And if she was intentionally created by Sparkle, then why would she even have to tell her creation about anything if she can just inherit certain memories of hers? Lastly, we are yet to see any documented evidence of Imagine being able to sustain their existence outside of Planarcadia. Meanwhile, Sparxie freely comes to us on the Express. Though this is more likely to be Sparkle in disguise, but still. Sparkle said that before the start of the Phantasmoon games, the wish power is at its strongest, so she could have created Sparxie right before our arrival, to have a little fun with us on Planarcadia. Or perhaps Sparxie is nothing more than just a virtual avatar of Sparkle, created by her and brought into the reality by the fans she gathered. Whatever the case, if Sparxie is an Imagine, it is a very complex one, born differently from any other Imagine. Alright, so Sparxie is not exactly an ideogenerative Imagine, but why is she not a mask? Well, let's start with the fact that Sampo's mask, which was hidden somewhere in the tavern in one of the barrels up until Sparkle's quest in 2.0, did not move anywhere without its owner and just sat there quietly in a barrel until he took it back. Alright, it was more of a joke. Unless... Sparxie is the fusion between Sparkle's and Sparxie's personalities. If they were to be a mask and a host, the end result would have looked like either Sparkle or Sparxie, depending on who the original one was. Just with minor visual differences and of course new mask on the forehead, yet Sparxie doesn't look like that at all. It is a strange, hypertrophied imitation of a human being that only vaguely resembles Sparxie and barely resembles Sparkle at all. She has their characteristic features but looks unnatural, like a doll put together from the fabric left after other dolls. As if it's a result of a fusion that cannot happen under normal circumstances, like returning mask to its owner, only by force in an incorrect way. But why does she look like that? Because Sparxie is 2/3 of Sparxie and just 1/3 of Sparkle. She is their amalgamation in which Sparkle lost the mental battle. You probably didn't understand what I'm getting at now. I'll try to explain. Sparxie is not a mask and not an Imagine in the usual sense, rather a literal part of Sparkle's personality split off from her consciousness and acquired physical form. We're getting ahead of ourselves here, but it has to be mentioned. Sparkle is afraid to show her true self. She hides from it behind the faces of other people that she puts on, playing out others' lives in an attempt to escape from that of her own, from a life she's not at all happy with. Over the course of her life, she changes thousands of roles, and one of these was Sparxie. Successful, a streamer beloved by tens of thousands, basking in rays of not just fame, but the recognition of other people. People that are obsessed with her. A dream so powerful that here it was able to materialize. She is not a mask in a physical way, it is a metaphorical mask, behind which is Sparkle, once again escaping from reality. What she turned into later, under the influence of other people's wish power, is a whole different story, of course. That is precisely why Sparxie is fundamentally so similar to Sparkle, and why Sparxie looks the way she looks. Within her is a mixture of real Sparkle. Sparxie is an obsessive image that still lives deep in her head, and Sparxie embodied in life. 2 against 1. And in the end, after they emerge victorious from the battle with Sparxie, Sparkle takes on her identity. She no longer runs from it, but embraces this role, just like any other. This is why Sparxie after the main story is simply Sparkle in disguise. Or maybe it's much simpler and Sparxie is just Sparkle, masterfully playing two roles at once. We've already seen her capable of splitting herself and controlling multiple bodies at once. So perhaps the entire story of 4.0 was a meticulously planned performance with little to no improvisation on her part. This luck on Astral Express somewhat confirms that. Who knows? After all, Sparkle's the one behind half of the game's script. Allow me to make a small unscripted detour here. Initially, this video was supposed to be way longer and should have included both thorough analysis of all Sparkle's powers that we've been shown so far, as well as a discussion as to why I consider her the loneliest and most misunderstood character in the entire game. At first, I wanted to make this video just after the 2.3 update came out, when Penacony arc ended, yet my laziness got the better of me, resulting in me procrastinating for not only the remainder of 2.x, but the whole Amphoros too. Even when it was announced that 3.8 will be extended, I still didn't get around to making this video, and now I feel like the right time has passed. So here's the point. With your support, this video could be the first in a series of lore videos about Sparkle. If you'd like to see 2 more videos on the aforementioned topics, please let me know in the comments, so I know people are still interested. Now back to the topic of this video. Even Sparkle herself probably can't answer that question. At the end, roll credits. Throughout her whole life, she wore one mask after another, both physical and metaphorical, hiding behind them until they became an integral part of her identity, dissolved into the person who will one day be called Sparkle, and replaced her true character. The actor who has played countless characters now continues to play, no longer roles of fictional people, but the role of herself. She plays the character named Sparkle, unaware that beneath it once hid an entirely different person. 1,000 performances, 1,000 masks, 1,000 faces, and 1,000 places merged into one veil.
The one wearing the veil. That's Sparkle.
But who is under the veil? The more of her trailers you watch, the less you understand. The more you read lore related to her, the less sense it makes. And yet, they tell us about this girl's true origins, about the internal struggle that once raged within her, and about who she had become now, more than might appear at the first glance. They just shouldn't be taken literally. Everything she shows to us is just a metaphor, with a message to be deciphered behind it. Sparkle is a master of illusions, after all. Sparkle loves to come up with all sorts of stories about her origins and about how she became who she is today. To everyone she meets, she tells something new. Sometimes for her own benefit, other times to pretend that she's someone that she's not, and sometimes merely for fun, so that after she can thoroughly enjoy the reaction of the one she talks to. So, in her character stories, there are several variants of her origin present. In the first story, an abandoned orphan stumbles upon a traveling troupe of actors performing, and begins to attend their performances over and over again, eager to see the masked woman playing the lead role once more. On the last day, she steps behind the curtain, and there the woman hands her a mask, inviting her to try out for the stage and become the new Sparkle. And so she performed her first show. In the second story, a strange faceless woman ventured out into the city, lurking under the cover of night, kidnapping lingering people from the streets. Keeping them locked in her house, she asked them odd, banal questions. If this thing happens to you, what emotions would you feel? Every answer received was carefully written down on paper masks, until there was no more space left on them. Fear or joy, they were mere words for her. She could not feel emotions, and could only guess what they meant. She was not real like ordinary people, yet she wrote their answers down and released the masks back on the streets, hoping that, filled with genuine emotions of outsiders, the masks could become more real than she herself. In the third story, Sparkle is not a human, but a being named Doll, a vessel owned by the mask. It dictates the doll what emotions to feel, how to behave, what gestures to use, and what facial expressions to show. She had no will of her own, and in public she acted as the mask dictated, but she still longed to truly live. So, when they were alone, Sparkle wrote plays, in which, through other characters, it was as if she tried to animate herself and allow them to experience the feelings her honor had deprived her of. It is revealed in the final story that everything we've read so far was a lie, one of countless stories Sparkle made up about herself. Unsurprisingly, they contradict each other and don't fit together like the stories of other characters. But are these stories really just there to show how cleverly she can lie on the fly? Hey, Miss Sparkle never lies! Alright, to show how capable she is of making stories. For some perhaps that is the reason. But let's look at this once more through the prism of what we already know about the real Sparkle. The second story is the easiest to interpret. As we know, Sparkle herself is certainly able to feel emotions, evident both in how expressively she behaves with others and in how she sometimes literally describes what's happening around her as fun, boring, and so on. Then, what is the meaning of this story? The girl without a face, the girl without emotions, is a manifestation of an inferiority complex, hidden deep within her soul, a manifestation of a rejection of her own personality, unworthy of standing alongside other people. Her emotions are not genuine and natural enough. She herself is not as alive as the others are. She is somehow different, wrong. The lines about paper masks are the allusion to Sparkle herself. Changing one role after another, coming up with all sorts of extraordinary stories about people who had never existed, embodying and becoming one with the characters that appeal to the public. She gradually runs from her own identity, replacing it with created personas, because she thinks that the characters she plays are more alive and natural than she herself ever was. To some extent, the third story tells us the same. Sparkle was never able to live her own life the way she wanted. She was an unwitting hostage to circumstances that prevented her from becoming the person she always wanted to be. She started making up and trying on other identities, inventing stories and living through them as if she herself was the main character, to at least by doing so compensate for the emotions and experiences that she did not get to experience in her own life. It's hard to tell definitively what the man that appears at the very end of the story is supposed to represent, but it seems to me that the most suitable prototype for him is the tavern. Was it a fool Sparkle met along her life journey, or Aha himself handing her an invitation onto a path she could never leave? Who knows? And what about the mask whose hostage doll Sparkle was? It has nothing to do with the girl's past. It is a veiled message that now the real Sparkle, the one we know, is held hostage by the very mask she has put onto herself. Both the physical mask, the very one that always sits on top of her head and binds her with unbreakable bonds to the fools, the tavern, the elation, and Aha himself, and the psychological mask, the one she put on in an attempt to escape from reality and from her own self. She'll never be able to take off neither the former nor the latter, and therefore all that remains for her is to relive other people's lives over and over again, imagining how they could have become her own. It is the most difficult to interpret the first story, as the core message in it is more of a topic for my next video. And yet it's impossible not to note that the second part of the narrative is all about how Sparkle put on the mask and struggled to get into the role of someone else for the first time. Just as the girl in the story became Sparkle, Sparkle became who she is today. And what about the last story where she confesses to lying? Perhaps Sparkle herself answers the question of why she makes all of this up. She loves to put herself in another character's shoes, experiencing all their emotions and worries as close to reality as possible. She invests herself fully in every figure she takes, so that no one is left doubting their authenticity. She tries to mold herself into people that she isn't, yet each time she stops at the very last moment, barely before she herself begins to believe in the reality of a persona she once created for herself. After all, it had already happened once, when she put on her very first mask. Is there a stage more tempting than her own life? Once upon a time, she was an ordinary human, but once she had put the mask on, she could never ever take it off again. The Rubicon had already been crossed, and there was no turning back. Now she runs away from intrusive thoughts about who she once was, coming up with one fake story after another to try and replace her real past. She tries on the role of one person, then another, running from who she really is. Why? Because she knows that there's no turning back, and rather than stirring up the past, she should embrace the present and the future as quickly as she can? Or maybe because her past was far more sorrowful than the present that she lives in today, the present in which she feels elation. Whatever the answer is, why does she so diligently yet indirectly tries to tell us about her past? Why is she so desperate to find someone who will understand her and to whom she can open up. Nevertheless, this is a topic for another video. I'll mention once again that if you wanna hear me talking about why Sparkle is the loneliest character in the game, leave a comment down below. Sparkle once said that no one cared who she was until she put on the mask. The audience does not care about who is behind the mask. They are drawn to the character they see on stage, but the life of an actor playing that character interests no one. Unrecognized, endlessly lonely, misunderstood, valued for not who she is, but who she can become and how convincingly she can pretend to be someone that she never was and never will be, Sparkle has become immersed into the role of Sparkle, herself. The girl she once was is no more. Now she plays the role of an actor that plays the roles of other people, not breaking the character even for a second. After all, if you spent an entire life building a character, sooner or later all that's left is that character, and behind it, emptiness. She sincerely believed in the character by the name of Sparkle and began to live as her. Sparkle suffers from the identity loss syndrome. She never plays one role for longer than she's supposed to, out of fear to become stuck, become a hostage of one stereotype. She's simultaneously afraid of and reluctant to show her true self, as she does not remember at all who she was before she became Sparkle. And yet, involuntarily, at times when she's not even aware of it, her old, true personality breaks out and makes itself known. She lacks the inner strength to reassemble herself shattered into 1,000 pieces back into a single whole and gaze into the mirror of her soul. Thus she cuts off unnecessary, outdated parts of herself in hope that one day someone will see the actor through the mask and will be able to pull her back together, taking off the Sparkle mask. Quite the melancholic note. However, I know something that could perhaps lighten up the mood. Everyone's favorite Sparkle trailer. Let's pay a little attention to it too. Have you ever wondered what exactly is going on in the debut trailer of this character? Why there are multiple Sparkles? Why is she arguing with her own self and points a gun at herself? Does this trailer even make any sense? Perchance you didn't notice that the masks the two main Sparkles wear have different colors. The red one, cruel, cold, unshakable, leading this confrontation, seems something alien to us, something that resembles Sparkle only visually. It is the embodiment of Sparkle's madness, the personification of her stepping onto the path of the masked fools. She gradually pushes the white mask, the real Sparkle, the person that is hiding behind the stage name, to cross the line beyond which there will be no return. The white mask was once interested in stepping onto the path of elation, alluring and attractive, but looking inside of it, understanding what it will turn her into, she became frightened and tried to step back, but it was already too late. An external force had already tipped the scales, and no matter how hard Sparkle tried to escape, realizing how dangerous it was, she was not given an opportunity to refuse. This trailer embodies the mental confrontation igniting within Sparkle, as she stands on the brink of an endless abyss, symbolizes the last attempts of her true identity at resisting in the face of madness that had almost consumed her. What is the meaning of all these Sparkles whose bodies we see throughout the trailer? The Sparkles that the red mask shoots as if getting rid of them? They represent a gradual fading of Sparkle's normality and its replacement with obsession, as if parts of her own self are withering away one by one under the pressure of a higher power. In the end, a gunshot rings out. It is a symbol that Sparkle had lost the confrontation with her madness and had fallen into its tight embrace. After Sparkle shoots herself, her once snow-white mask falls into the water and, submerged, half of it turns crimson red. Two masks become one. Two identities become one. Thus
our
their
fates become one.
Sparkle and what made her embark on the path of elation become one and the same. She accepts her madness, and her madness consumes her personality like a parasite and replaces it with itself until not only the mask, but its owner becomes red and white. That is how Sparkle is born.
I am Elation!
The most famous of Sparkle's lines is spoken by both sides at once, both the thing that managed to push her onto the path of madness and Sparkle herself, who, no longer resisting this temptation, wholeheartedly embraces the elation. The thing behind her madness shows Sparkle that this is what elation is, and now she is a part of it. A similar story is told in her second trailer, which can be seen as the prequel to the first one. You all remember the trailer's fairly straightforward and consistent plot. With each new cycle, Sparkle's mental state became gradually less and less stable, whereas the mask, her faithful companion, which initially showed only a single emotion, the one carved on it by its sculptor, first began to repeat Sparkle's emotions.
Like a mirror, showing my reflection.
And then, eventually, gained self-awareness, and started to show emotions independently of its owner. Mask's feelings were a complete opposite of the girl's own emotions, and it seemed like its very existence started to bring her suffering. The reasons for these changes remain unknown to us, and yet, if we are to turn on the subtitles and skip to the beginning of each of the three cycles, it turns out that Sparkle's very first performance was her debut, the second one was 99th one, and the third one a 999th one. She played the same role for many days, months, and even years, and as the time passed, the actor became one with her role. The girl has spent so much time as Sparkle that she began to forget where her stage persona ends and where her true personality begins. The border between them grew thin, until eventually it disappeared entirely. Her final words also hint at this. Why limit the character to a small stage of a theater when the stage for the character named Sparkle has long since become the soul of this girl, and thus the entire world of hers? Who is the real Sparkle? A question that can be interpreted in many ways. Someone will think of it as, who's the real deal, Sparkle or Sparxie? Others as, what does Sparkle truly feel? Is it even possible for her to stop pretending to be other people? But the question that she actually asks herself is there an actual Sparkle left within me? What am I, an actor or a role that's devoured its performer? As our discussion went on, you might have had a fair share of questions accumulated. What does the red mask represent? Why did Sparkle develop the identity loss syndrome? What prompted her to step on the path of elation? What caused such drastic changes in her mental state and in the behavior of her mask in the second trailer? Aha! Of course, we do not have a definitive answer, but consider this possibility. It explains literally everything. Sparkle didn't have to steal her mask from the mourning actors or create one herself, which are supposedly the primary ways to obtain a mask, to become the masked fool. She could have become one against her will. It's not uncommon for Aha to lend his power to someone else simply for fun. He made a mere worm his seminator as a joke to see whether it will be able to join the Genius Society. He can behave similar in regard to humans. Those in whom Aha saw the potential, he could have deliberately led to the very brink of ruin, quietly creeping closer and closer to them, altering their worldview and mental state, cause observing them slowly change forever made him elated. Have you ever noticed how in the second trailer the visual appearance of Sparkle's mask begins to change more and more the less naturally it behaves? At first, the mask matches the one Sparkle is supposed to wear on stage according to the play's plot. But then, the plot remains the same, but it's as if she's being handed an entirely different mask. During one of Sparkle's performances in the theater, Aha pretended to be a mask. At first, he assisted her with performances, altering the mask's appearance to reflect the emotions that the girl felt, making the play more immersive. Yet with each new performance, he became increasingly independent, until he became the lead in their duet. He broke her, convinced her that she was worthy of more. She didn't have to be an actor only on stage, because she can do what she loved the most anytime she wanted. She could become the masked fool. The red mask in her debut trailer is Aha himself. When Sparkle realized that the path of elation will only bring her to madness, she tried to step away from it, but it was already too late. Aha would have never let such an interesting toy slip off his hook, and thus he pushed her into the abyss of madness. The line that serves as the climax of the trailer, the contradistinction
I'm not Sparkle. No, I am Sparkle.
is an uneven confrontation ongoing deep within the girl's consciousness, with the power of a deity that has gazed upon her. It is simultaneously both her realizing that she doesn't want to become what she's destined to be, and Aha's mockery. He is Sparkle. He made this girl into what she's not. And without Aha, there would have been no Sparkle. Without Aha, this character would have never left the stage. In such an unusual way, we can interpret the last phrase she says too. Who's the real Sparkle? Of course, we have already discussed one interpretation of this quote, but what if we look at it from another angle? Who's the real Sparkle? The girl behind the mask, or Aha, who had put the mask on her against her will? And surely the phrase "I am Elation" belongs to him, because he actually is Elation. Sometimes I wonder with interest whether a piece of Aha's divine power is trapped within the red half of the mask, and concurrently within Sparkle herself. Against her will was she made a vessel for an Aeon that she never longed to worship, only cause he deemed her interesting. And Planarcadia gave us a lot of hints towards that. This image of Sparxie, this one of Sparkle's phrases, and remember how Sparkle said that Aha wasn't allowed in the tavern? The door at the entrance asked, seemingly with suspicion, whether she's actually Sparkle and not just someone pretending to be her. Yeah, surely the door meant Sparxie and not Aha, but what if? At the end of the day, it would have explained why she failed to open the full light orb at the end of the mission inside the tavern. Not because she suddenly stopped being maskful, but because for Aha, entry is forbidden. And oh, how Sparkle craves the Trailblazer's attention. She just needs to be the center of the main character's attention, whom she revolves around at every opportunity. And do you know which Aeon was circling around Akivilias crazy and circled himself up to the point that he even blew up the Express? Yeah, Aha. Sparkle is not an emanator of elation. She is an Aeon of elation. Sounds crazy? Yeah, what, did you expect otherwise? Only someone as equally crazy can produce a lore video about a crazy character. Whatever the truth is, all the world is a stage, and she is merely a player. Alright, let's summarize everything that we've learned today. The original Sparkle is Sparkle, who would have guessed? Sparxie is a mixed ideogenitive imaginary that was shaped out of Sparkle's unfulfilled deepest desires. Neither Sparkle nor Sparxie is the mask in a physical way. Sparkle was an actual actress at the theater. Her life was filled with all sorts of problems even before stepping on the path of elation. She even doubted if she has any value to bring into this world. Aha had an interest in Sparkle and tricked her into becoming a masked fool against her will. This girl suffers from an identity loss syndrome. She does not remember what her real personality is and is scared of finding out. In the meantime, she desperately wants to just become normal again. And the undoubtedly most important thing we've learned: Sparkle's the best girl. End of story, roll credits. Now for real. Thanks for watching, expect more such content in the future. If you want lore videos to come out more often, support me by leaving a like, a comment and subbing to the channel. See ya!